day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Russell Bozeman, State Forester with the Mississippi Forestry Commission. Russell, good to see you, sir.
Hey, Gerard, good to see you as well. Appreciate you having us on today.
We appreciate you joining us. So we wanted to kind of get an update from the Forestry Commission. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind, just with my eyeballs here in the state of Mississippi, is the vast amount of trees, and especially pine trees that are very common in our area, that succumbed to the drought over the last couple of years. How are we doing there?
You're right. We did see a fair amount of pine mortality as a result of the drought. The drought weakened the trees. We had some little pine beetles that helped facilitate a little more mortality throughout the state. So we do have a good number of dead pine trees in the state, which, when you start referring to wildfire, also become known as fuels.
Yeah. Well, is that not what we're witnessing in California? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? And I guess first, have you talked to anybody in your world out there to just kind of get even a deeper understanding of what happened, what was right, what was wrong, and how we got to where we are? Is that something being discussed in your orbit there?
So all the conversations we've had with any of our partners that are engaged in Western Fire and what's happening in California have all been about, are there any help we can offer at this period of time?
Sure.
And so
Absolutely.
it hasn't really been much in the, how can we do things better next time sort of venue, not
Sure.
yet. That is always a part of the conversation, especially once you get the fires contained and people's lives that have been disturbed, they start putting them back together. Then we'll look at a lot of that stuff for that particular fire. But for the most part right now, we don't have any resources that are in California from Mississippi, or at least from the Mississippi Forestry Commission. But we are willing to help should they need it. California or Western Fire in general, it's a very different ecosystem out there that we get to experience here. The Southeast is known to have plenty of rainy days, which certainly helps our vegetation and grows these magnificent forests that we have. At the same time, though, like for a big problem they've had in California was wind. And so fortunately, we don't have a lot of 80-mile-an-hour wind days in Mississippi as well.
Yeah.
And any fire that gets started with that kind of wind, you just need to stay out of the way of it.
So, Russell, what about all these reports and frankly, it just what have ended up being a lot of criticism in the management or mismanagement of the forest in Southern California, with the brush, of course, on the forest floors that many just refer to as just kindling, waiting to be ignited. That and just not, I guess, applying best practices in forest management, deforestation, and the like. What about that as far as Mississippi? How do we address those issues and manage our forest? And how much are we at risk of something like that happening here?
So in addition to the vegetation being a lot different, the terrain being a lot different, the climate being a lot different out west versus here in the south, land ownership is also a lot different here in the south, particularly in Mississippi. We've got 19.2 million acres of forest land in Mississippi. The vast majority of that, probably 70+% of it, is owned by non-industrial private forest landowners. So in Mississippi, it is private landowners that are owning those forests. Mississippi does have a very strong culture, both private landowners and public landowners, to use prescribed fire as a management tool to improve the forest conditions, to mitigate wildfire fuel buildup. It's great for wildlife. Most wildlife in the state love burning. And look, we have forests in this state that like fire so much, they won't even drop seed until they know a fire has been through the stand. So we have a lot of ecosystems in Mississippi that like fire. So Mississippi, when you look at the national average, Mississippi probably puts as much or more prescribed fire on the landscape to the tune of probably close to 500,000 acres a year than any other state.
Interesting. All right, so the main takeaway I have there is there are key differences, a lot of key differences that are factors in the risk of fire, these wildfires in particular. And of course, you made a point at the top of our discussion about the winds, which are obviously just exacerbating the situation significantly that we don't typically experience here in Mississippi.
That is correct.
So
If you remember back to the Gatlinburg fire, wind was the biggest problem there. It was blowing those embers from mountaintop to mountaintop, and it's
yeah.
hard to get in front of a fire and get it contained when it's jumping that far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it appears that when you have something of this scale and scope, that it's virtually impossible to have enough firefighting resources and assets to combat this. That the key is preventing this from happening. Is that kind of the way you guys see that?
Yes, sir. When it comes to wildfire, there's two main parts to it. There's wildfire prevention and wildfire suppression. The prevention side of things, in our opinion, is just important as the suppression side of things, particularly when you start getting into what we refer to as the wildland-urban interface, where you have homes, businesses, structures that are right next to wildland areas, the forested land areas. It is very important to, in fact, we even have a program called Firewise to help landowners and structure owners have some idea on how to make their facilities or homes as resistant to wildfire as they can long before the wildfire ever approaches the home.
Okay. So with respect, going back to the severe drought we experienced, I believe that was the late summer of 23, right? We had a couple of month period where we had very high temperatures, no rainfall, and man, you could see the vegetation just really checking out on us, and pine trees are prevalent all over the place. Is that kind of manifested the way it was expected? I felt like that we would have seen a lot more negative consequences of that than we have. I know it's still a bad thing, and I see dead timber all over the place, just in my area in central Mississippi. What's happening there? What are we doing, and what do we need to be doing?
So when it comes to the forest, pine trees, hardwood trees, etc., when they experience an event that causes them stress, it's not like a bush in your yard or grass in your yard. They take oftentimes years to show the full effect of what that stress did to that plant. I mean, a tree can take a significant stress event and take 10 years to die sometimes. So when we had the drought and then we started seeing the mortality as a result of the drought in that following spring, the folks that were calling us asking us, what does this mean? I mean, we told them then, you won't see the full effects of the drought for probably 3 to 5 years past the drought.
Wow.
And that's if you don't have another drought in the meantime. Trees are, they're long rotation things. Foresters have to plan 15, 20, 30, 50 years in advance when it comes to managing that forest. So what we do on the ground today or what the trees experience today may take a long time before it actually fully shows the effect. So we have a lot of good foresters in the state. We have a lot of programs and information in the state to help landowners make as informed a decision as they can based on what we know of what we may expect and how we can mitigate any potential damages. I will say, we on average, Mississippi has between 20 and 30,000 acres of wildfire every year. Last year, as a result of that drought, we ended up with about 51,000 acres of wildfire that my agency responded to last year. So we're not unfamiliar with wildfire in Mississippi. We are fortunate we don't have the wildfires that they do see out west that grow to hundreds of thousands of acres. Ownership, ecosystem, climate's a lot different. That's part of it too. But we also are fortunate to have a very robust and forest-centric economy and culture in Mississippi. We love trees in the South, and Mississippi is no exception. So we've got good managers, and we've been doing a good job here in Mississippi for a lot of years.
Well, that's good to hear. We appreciate that because they're valuable assets to our state. And I agree. We like our trees, and I'm one of them. So it's a beautiful landscape that we are blessed to live in. Russell, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot, man.
Yes, sir.
Russell Bozeman, the state forester with the Mississippi Forestry Commission, has been our guest. We're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back in the Element Wealth